Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, severe storms uprooted, toppled, and snapped trees across the Commonwealth. How you can help keep them healthy in the future. And a possible glimmer of hope for a U.S. journalist jailed in Russia. Why some think a prisoner swap could be in the works.
Plus, we are tracking scattered showers and storms to return as early as tomorrow. All those details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Olivia Calfee. Steve has the night off. This past weekend, severe winds caused a lot of tree damage for many in Kentucky. Tree companies are busy. A lot of people have damage and some winds just too strong for any tree. But there are some things you may be able to do to prevent some damage in the future. WYMT's Phil Pendleton has the story.
He's high up in a tree in this Danville neighborhood, cutting away dead or a too damaged part of this massive tree. It's all part of the work for a tree cutting service. Following a storm, the challenges are many.
And then they fall and they get unusual pressures on them. You know, they're twisted, or there's a lot of stuff that's unseen. So it's really more dangerous, and you have to be highly aware when you're piecing them out.
Crews like this are very busy right now, and he says normal tree cutting procedures are often put on the back burner.
So be patient with your with your tree guys. If they don't get back to you, it's probably because they're busy.
Even strong, healthy trees are no match for some wind, but there are some things to look for that could lessen some future damage.
The first one I would say would be to look for what's called a conch, which is those mushrooms that are growing out of the side of the tree. So sometimes we see them down around the base of a tree, but often I tell people look up in the canopy.
There are times when the entire tree needs to come down before a storm can bring it down. But after a storm, sometimes damage can lead to a need for a total tree removal.
Usually tell people a good rule of thumb is if more than a third of the tree is gone, then you may want to think about calling somebody to remove it.
Kinley says many of the trees in the Danville area are old and tall, can be susceptible to a lot of wind damage.
It's the end of their days, or they're just so huge, they've taken up so much space for a long time.
Experts say the most important thing is to recognize the health of the tree, safety of areas below. In Boyle County, Phil Pendleton, WYMT Mountain News.
University of Kentucky extension agents say it is always a good idea to inspect trees at least once a month for possible damage or disease that could impact the life of your trees.
Well, the good news, no severe weather issues across the mountains today, but we are watching out for possibly a few showers out there. Here's a look at First Alert Pinpoint Doppler. As you can see, most of us are dry and hot at this hour, but we are watching out for a few spotty sprinkles just to the east of downtown Norton over portions of Wise County. Nothing too heavy in this location. Also watching out for a few spotty showers just to the south and west of downtown Irvin in Estill County as well. Like I said, nothing too heavy, but a few spotty showers are possible across the mountains as we go into this evening. For most of us, it's looking like this, hot and dry across the mountains. Here's a live look at I-64 at Moorhead. That current temperature 88 degrees. It feels even warmer though once you factor in the moisture and those dew points as well. Most of us right now in the middle to upper 80s, 86 for Jackson, also Manchester, 85 in London, also Pikeville, lower 80s over in Grundy and Clintwood at this hour. But as we go through the rest of tonight, most of us are dry, only a small chance of a stray shower. But those higher rain chances are not far away, and they linger into the weekend as well. But what about the amount of rain we're looking at? All those details coming up in just a few minutes. Olivia?
All right, thank you, Cameron. Just across the river in West Virginia, Huntington police have released the name of the suspect killed by a Huntington police officer on Monday. Chief Phil Watkins says Ahmed Abdullah from Detroit is the man who died in the shooting. The incident happened Monday afternoon on 14th Street. Chief Watkins says someone called 911 saying Abdullah was threatening to shoot the caller and blow up a house. The chief says when the initial officer arrived, Abdullah refused to cooperate, threatened the officer saying he had a gun, and he ran at the officer, which resulted in that officer shooting him. Authorities say 4 people were seriously injured in a shooting earlier today in Chicago. It happened in the West Englewood neighborhood. It appears 3 of the victims were shot and a 4th was badly beaten. All 4 were hospitalized in serious condition. It is not clear what led to the shooting. The Arizona Department of Public Safety says it is investigating a trooper-involved shooting death in Phoenix yesterday. They say a man in a stolen vehicle failed to pull over for a traffic stop, eventually tried to flee on foot and pulled out a gun. It says troopers in pursuit fired their weapons, but it is unclear if that killed the man or if he shot himself. No one else was hurt as a result of the chase and gunfire. A family in Maryland is without a home the day after the 4th of July. And officials say it is all because of fireworks that were not disposed of properly. Officials say the family was first alerted their house was on fire just before 11 p.m. They heard an explosion and looked outside and saw flames. Everyone inside the home made it out safely. Firefighters say more than 75 responders were called to the scene. One firefighter was taken to a hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Damages are estimated at around $1.25 million. UPS and Teamsters say contract negotiations have stopped. Each side is accusing the other of walking away from the table. The Teamsters have already voted to authorize a strike if a new deal is not reached. The current contract expires July 31st. Talks ended early this morning after being unable to reach a consensus on a new 4-year labor contract. The Teamsters have said a deal would have had to been needed to reach today in order for all members to vote on in time. President Biden met with the leaders of Sweden at the White House today. The Swedish Prime Minister's visit underscores U.S. support for Sweden to become a full member of NATO as soon as possible. CBS's Nicole Skenga has more.
President Biden welcomed Sweden's Prime Minister to the White House, showing strong support for the nation's bid to formally join NATO.
The United States fully supports Sweden's membership in NATO.
Both Sweden and its neighbor Finland, which have historically remained neutral, applied for NATO membership last year after Russia invaded Ukraine.
Sweden is going to make our alliance stronger and has the same value set that we have in NATO.
While Finland became a full member of NATO earlier this year, Sweden's path to enter the military alliance has been blocked by fellow NATO allies Hungary and Turkey.
President Biden is expected to make the case for Sweden to join the alliance when he meets with NATO members at a key summit in Lithuania next week.
The president remains focused on reinforcing the international coalition backing Ukraine as it pursues a counteroffensive against Russia.
Across the board, we seem to be in agreement on almost everything. And we're stepping up to protect our shared democratic values, including providing security and humanitarian assistance to people in Ukraine.
NATO's expansion in Europe would require consensus from all member nations, as well as U.S. Senate approval. Nicole Skenga, CBS News, the White House.
Top diplomats from Turkey and Sweden will meet tomorrow at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, to discuss the issue. Ukraine has expressed a very strong interest in joining the alliance. As the war in Ukraine rages on, U.S. and NATO forces have been on active standby in Europe. Today, Senator Mitch McConnell honored soldiers at Fort Knox who had been deployed to Europe in response to Russian forces invading Ukraine. The 5th Corps was sent to reinforce our NATO allies, something that the senator says the U.S. will continue to support.
If you want to send a message to President Xi of China, defeat Russia in Ukraine. So this has worldwide significance, and 5th Corps is right in the middle of helping with this massive effort of the democratic world.
The Department of Defense says since February 2022, the U.S. has deployed or extended more than 20,000 additional forces to Europe in response to the Ukraine crisis, bringing our current total to more than 100,000 troops across Europe. There is a glimmer of hope that a prisoner swap with Russia involving jailed Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich could be in the works. Speculation arose after the 31-year-old journalist received a visit from U.S. officials. The same day, Russian diplomats visited a jailed Russian citizen in the United States. CBS's Natalie Brand has the latest from the White House.
Nearly 2 weeks after Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich last appeared in a Moscow courtroom where he is facing espionage charges, there are signs Russia may be open to a prisoner exchange. When asked about the possibility Tuesday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov replied, "There have been certain contacts on the subject, but we don't want them to be discussed in public."
Speculation arose after the U.S. ambassador to Russia visited the 31-year-old journalist in prison Monday. The same day, a Russian diplomat visited a Russian citizen who is behind bars in Ohio on cybercrime charges.
Gershkovich was arrested at the end of March. Both he and the Wall Street Journal deny he was spying.
What the Russian authorities are saying is utter nonsense.
Appearing on Face the Nation shortly after Gershkovich was taken into custody, Wall Street Journal editor-in-chief Emma Tucker called his arrest a complete outrage.
Evan is a very talented, experienced reporter. He's accredited to report from Russia, and he was on an assignment doing what he always does. He was gathering information.
The U.S. State Department has had no comment on a prisoner exchange, saying only it expected Russia to continue to allow access to the journalist. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
There is precedent for U.S.-Russian prisoner swaps, the most recent, of course, being WNBA basketball star Brittany Griner. She was arrested on drug charges and swapped in December for an infamous Russian weapons dealer. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, experts say identity thieves are increasingly using advanced techniques to try and compromise your information. We will have some steps you can take to protect yourself.
And we are tracking warm and muggy weather to stick around. The details on higher rain chances coming up.